I'm very pleased to have in the studio with me Gail Trotter, attorney, writer, senior fellow with the Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org, and her very own website, Gail, Gayle, Trotter, TROTTER.com?
Yes.
.com. Great to have you here with us, Gail.
Great to be back, Tom.
Thank you for joining us. You wrote this piece for The Hill called The Real Reason Everyone Should Care About the Next Speaker. Why should we care about the next speaker?
Well, most people across America think this is just inside DC stuff and it doesn't matter who the next speaker is. And kind of in my article, I say it's like Al Gore challenging Bush in the debate about the Norwood Dingle bill. And no one knew what that was. No one cared about it. No one cared what Bush's opinion or position on it was.
Right.
And I'm saying the same as with the Speaker of the House. Most people think it's not really that important. But in my piece, I go through what Dave Bratt, congressman from Virginia, who is the only person in American history who launched a successful primary challenge to a sitting House Majority Leader.
Right. He took down Eric Cantor.
Yeah. And he's a economics professor, and he kind of outlined the financial crisis that our country is facing.
But we don't have a financial crisis.
We do have a financial crisis.
No, if we had a financial crisis, then we wouldn't be able to sell our bonds. And our interest rates would be 15-20%. We were having a financial crisis in 1976. We're not having a financial crisis right now. The world wants to buy our bonds. I understand that there's a group of banksters in New York City, billionaire banksters, who are funding largely Republican candidates to get hysterical about the national debt, because the national debt is treasuries, right? Treasury bonds and bills is a way that individuals can invest their savings without risk. And if we
Nothing is without complete risk. I mean, you know that.
Federal government has never defaulted on its debts, and I don't think it ever will. This country
Past
is the
performance
richest,
is no guarantee of future results.
This country is the richest country on earth. And so what these banksters are saying is, hey, there is demand for low risk, low return debt, right? For investments. And every dollar that is part of the national debt is somebody else's investment. It's real simple. And the banksters are saying, instead of loaning these people money at 2%, or instead of giving them a 2% return on their investment, we can give them a 1% return on their investment. We could skim 1% off the top. We just have to get the government out of the business. The government is competing with the banksters for the business of offering people safe places to invest. And that's where all this is coming from. And that's why you get people like Dave Bratt, who have throughout their lives been funded by people like right-wing banksters.
As an economics professor at a very small college.
Absolutely. And completely
Virginia.
Out of the mainstream of economics professors. Yeah, the Koch brothers are actually funding economic chairs in universities all around the United States on the stipulation, we will give this money to your university, but only if you put our guys in there. And our guys are the economists who are going to say there is no global warming and the national debt is a horrible thing. The national debt is just fine. If our debt was any kind of crisis at all, the interest rates would go up. It's real simple.
Well, I'm here not to represent the banksters. I don't get any funding from the banksters. I'm here on behalf of the grassroots, the people who look at this and think the $19 trillion that we have in national debt is mortgaging their children and grandchildren's future. So when we have Dave Bratt go out there and say in 11 years, we will not have any money from our federal revenues to pay anything other than debt repayment and the entitlements, we won't have a dime to pay for the military, transportation, education, anything
He's making
else.
numbers up. You look at the CBO numbers where people like Dave Bratt go in and say, if the economy stays as stinky as it is, and if we don't raise taxes on rich people, and if we don't ever raise the cap on the Social Security tax.
You don't think we should raise the cap on the Social Security age? Because it's changed from the 1930s when people had less time to retire?
Actually, if you look at the statistics, the top 10% of Americans live longer than they did in the 1950s. The bottom 90% don't. So that's a statistic that applies to rich people, but it doesn't apply to everybody else. You don't want bricklayers working until they're 70 years old. You don't want waitresses working until they're 70 years old.
Well, my law partner is my 86-year-old father who works 40 hours a week. So it's not bricklaying, but there is an idea now that we have this new retirement mentality. And if we're able to continue to work because we have these great health benefits, then it's a good thing for our society for people to continue to be productive and not just fade into the sunset.
Just because I can retire next year when I turn 65 doesn't mean I'm going to.
Right.
I intend to do this job for this show for at least another decade.
You're not turning 65, are you really?
I am. Yeah,
wow.
Next May.
Wow.
But
I would not have guessed that.
Well,
Props to you.
Thank you, Gail. But the fact of the matter is that, having a retirement age of 65 doesn't mean you're required to retire at 65 unless you're like in the military or something, or you're a U-2 pilot or whatever. But the point that I was making about Dave Brad is when you go to the CBO and you say, here are a whole bunch of constraining variables, give me economic projections based on this, it's garbage in, garbage out. The economy is not always going to be this bad.
You hope. For the last 7 years, we've run $500 billion deficits. And even John Maynard Keynes, who's a liberal economist, said we have to run surpluses in the good years so that we can pay for the deficits in the bad years.
No. He said we have to have surpluses in the good years. Yeah, okay. It's close enough. I mean, the point is so that we will have money that we can spend in the bad years.
Right.
And the Republicans for the last 8 years have been saying, no, you can't spend money during these bad years. You cannot stimulate the economy. And again, But
we did anyway. We spent more in one day of President Obama's stimulus, $787,000 in one day of the stimulus than we spent in 10 years in the Iraq War. So we have this conventional wisdom.
What?
The Department of Defense, look it up. When we have this conventional wisdom out there that the Iraq War and the Iran War, or not the Iran War, the Afghanistan War have bankrupted our nation, that's something that we need numbers to come against, because we're not going to balance our budget on the back of the military.
The United States has balanced its budget once in its history. It was in 1836. It was done by Andrew Jackson. And you know what happened?
Who opposed the National Bank?
That's why he balanced the budget. And you know what happened? We had a 7-year depression that was worse than the Great Depression in the 1930s.
Well, we've had 7 years of $500 billion deficits the last 7 years.
Right. And every one of those $500 billion deficits represents another opportunity for somebody to invest $500 billion safely. When Andrew Jackson paid off the national debt, there was no place you could safely put your money. And people didn't trust banks because we didn't have Glass-Steagall back then, and from the George Washington administration until 1933, we never went more than 15 years without a nationwide banking failure. So the country went into an absolute depression because we didn't have a high enough national debt, because you could not invest money in treasury bonds, in government bonds, because they weren't available.
But government shouldn't be in that business. What is the sole purpose of the federal government?
Now you're making the Koch brothers and the Paul Singer argument.
I'm not
the billionaire
affiliated
argument.
with the Koch brothers. This is coming from people that I talk to around the country who are really concerned
funded by the Koch brothers. I'm talking
about I was just on a radio show with a host out in Idaho, and this Tony called in and talked to me about it. He's not funded by. He's just a rancher
Tony
in
is
Idaho.
listening to some right-wing host, or he's watching Fox News. The point is that the billionaires want. You just said, why should the government be in the business of being available to people as a safe investment? Why should I be able to put my 401k into Treasury bills, which by the way is where it is, because I'm not trusting the stock market right now. Why should I be able to do that? Because it's a good thing for our country. Our government should do that. Now, I realize the bankers are saying, no, Wells Fargo, they want to be the only place that I can put my money, so that they can skim more off the top. The average American, by the time they're 65, who has had a 401k since their 30s, has spent over $100,000 in bank fees on their 401k that most of them never even knew were taken out.
Which I don't think is great, and I would object
terrible.
to that
We're being robbed by the banksters.
But I would say that's the problem with our tax system generally, that it favors this type of retirement planning. No, it is. All of it. I think that's the problem when someone from the left and the right, when we come together and talk about stuff, we come from a different worldview. So I would like the government to be less involved in all of these decisions, to get out of the way, to allow entrepreneurship to flourish.
The opposite of that, if I can't put my 401k into U.S. Treasury bills because they're no longer there because we paid off the debt, so the government's not issuing any Treasury bills, then my only choice is what? Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Paul Singer, Mitt Romney. I mean, I got to invest with somebody.
We have $19 trillion in national debt, so that's not going away anytime soon.
We have $19 trillion in savings.
But how about we stop adding to it? How about we stop adding to it?
Why? It represents savings. It's a good thing. It really is.
I disagree. We fundamentally disagree.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Gail Trotter, her website, Gayle, Trotter.com, and, of course, the Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.